Hello, Tom Maguire. It's been a little while, sorry. I took last week off from book reviews because it was Easter Sunday and then it was Easter weekend and it was my 40th birthday on the 7th. So I was very tempted to do a book review. I've got a couple that I need to do. I've read two just recently. Um, but I just decided, you know what, there's no harm in missing it and just relaxing a little bit. And I was really relaxed. I had a really nice time just kind of not thinking too much about work, not thinking too much about anything other than just quality time with family and friends. So yeah, it's been good. But I've got a really good book for you today. It's called Napoleon Hill's Outwitting the Devil. He wrote this in 1938 and it wasn't released until 2011. So that alone is pretty interesting, I think. Quite amazing. But basically, I was thinking about things, personal development. I think about personal development a lot. I'm always reading or listening to a book. And I thought we're sort of turning 40. I was kind of looking back and thinking, I'm really glad that I started taking my personal development that bit more seriously those few years ago. I've always been someone who's kind of keen on pushing myself to a certain extent. I think I've always been a goal setter without realising, without actually necessarily kind of setting them specifically. I've always been someone who enjoys achieving. But it wasn't until a few years ago, 3-4+ years ago, that I started taking my personal development seriously and reading a hell of a lot more. It wasn't until then that I really kind of realised, how much of a difference it makes. And now that I'm 40 years old, not that 40 is very old, I don't feel particularly old. I like to think, hopefully, that I've got a bit of time left yet, hopefully. But I'm just really glad that I started when I did. Do I regret not starting much earlier? No, to be honest, I don't really. I kind of think we make our choices in our life. I feel like I've experienced different things and stuff, so it is what it is. It happens when it happens, I think. And I personally, I'm quite an optimist. I think things happen at times they do for a reason. So, but I definitely kind of want my kids to grow up kind of enjoying personal development and enjoying being able to develop themselves and kind of reach their potential. So I'm going to try and instill that in them to a certain extent without being too pressurized. But yeah, this is a personal development book. This is, Napoleon Hill is almost kind of the king of personal development, really. He's one of those early days classics. He did Think and Grow Rich, which is absolutely a number one classic. He did How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, which I think I have somewhere around here. A nice old copy there, that one. That's a good book as well. So he is kind of the old... Stay there for a minute. He's a bit of a king of personal development. And I've been meaning to read this one for quite a long time. It's been on my list for quite a while, but I kind of went off personal development a little bit. I always read books that I think will help me develop myself in one way or another, whether that's non-fiction, occasionally fiction, it depends what it is. And I always try to see the personal development side of things, and I try and bring that out in my reviews. Because I think personal development and self-help gets a bad reputation, and I think sometimes for good reason. I think there is a lot of bad information out there, so it's kind of my ambition, it's one of my drives to get as much good information out there from the world of personal development as possible. And I want my kids to benefit from it. I want my kids to look back and look at the books that I read and decide whether they want to read them as well, and whether they'll get something out of them as well. So I was a bit put off personal development. I almost felt as though I've read like 200-300 personal development books, and you start to get to the stage where you feel as though you're hearing the same message over again, just repackaged. And a lot of it is that, and a lot of people just make money out of saying the same stuff over and over, but in a different way. And sometimes that's fine because it reinforces it in your mind and it kind of reminds you and it motivates you. Different people motivate you in different ways, and that's fine. But I just got a bit bored of it. I just thought there are so many hundreds of thousands, millions of books out there that are inspiring and motivating and wonderful in different ways. Do I want to keep reading these strict personal development books? But I decided to give this one a go, and I'm really glad I did. The first sort of half hour, maybe hour, I was a little bit like, oh, okay, this is exactly what I thought it would be. An old capitalist kind of pretending that the message from the devil is that we should all work hard and be focused and stuff. But actually, as it went on, I really enjoyed it. And it's definitely one of those books that, if you follow the advice, you're bound to make an improvement in your life, really. I think if you take things too much to heart and you worry and pressure yourself that you're not achieving those things all the time, then of course that's not going to be healthy. But if you just give yourself a bit of a break and just try to make small changes day to day and just try to stay focused, try to work out what your purpose is, try to be purposeful in what you do, you know, try to bring discipline into your life, then you will make improvements over time. And it is about kind of understanding that these things won't happen overnight. They will happen cumulatively in time. And this is basically what he's saying. He's talking to the devil. He's asking the devil these questions that he has to answer truthfully. And the devil is basically saying that there are only sort of 2% of people that he can't control. So he controls 98 in every 100 people. And he basically says that the 2% that he doesn't control are people who, they're not drifters, as he puts it. They're people who have real purpose and determination. They know where they're going in life. They know what they want to do. They're motivated. And no one's going to stop them. They've got a certain spring in their step. They've got a glint in their eye. They're focused. They're purposeful. And he basically argues that people who are easily distracted by different things, by alcohol, drugs, smoking, sex, thirst for knowledge, lots of different things, those people drift. The devil tempts them away from having purpose and they drift, and then they become weaker. And he basically argues that when you suffer in one discipline, when you slack in one discipline, you slack in another, and it has a knock-on effect. And so the argument is that basically people who are completely focused and purposeful, they're the ones that get on okay and are happy and don't have to worry about the devil. But the ones who are tempted by different things and drift, you know, maybe they make some money, then they're tempted into spending it on something and pursuing something else. But it's a very basic kind of idea, but it's really nicely written. It's really entertaining to listen to. It was the audiobook I listened to on this one. It's really well narrated. It's just really enjoyable. I really liked it. It's that proper old school personal development. It's the sort of book that will do a lot of people good, I think. And even if you're someone who's really into personal development and you've read a lot of it like I have, you'll still enjoy it. So I also read Down and Out in Paris and London by George Orwell, which is a fantastic book. If you follow me, you know that I like George Orwell. First time I've read this book. He wrote it around the same sort of time, the late 30s, so it's quite interesting seeing the two different things. George Orwell is obviously really famous and considered to be a literary sort of giant, quite rightly so. Whereas Napoleon Hill is sort of personal development man and seen as kind of more of a capitalist type sort of figure who's probably a bit more sneered upon. People are a bit more pompous about, I would say. Whereas George Orwell is up there, isn't he? Is kind of taught in schools and everything. And it was interesting to make the two comparisons because George Orwell is talking about his time in Paris and London when he was basically down and out and he was living off nothing and he was working really hard, and he's talking about the slums and how hard people work and how little they get back and blah, blah, blah. So it's really interesting to see some of the parallels from two very different perspectives, but kind of similar perspectives in some ways. So George Orwell is looking at how we work so hard, so many of us as slaves, and we literally just make just enough to make ends meet and often end up on the streets as beggars and, you know, what the hell's the point kind of thing. You can work yourself so hard and you just don't get there. Whereas Napoleon Hill's kind of more capitalist sort of attitude is work hard and stay focused and you will succeed. And both are kind of right in different ways, and it's just interesting. I'm going to review that one very soon. There's probably not a lot of point in reviewing George Orwell's book because, you know, they've been reviewed hundreds of times, haven't they, and picked apart. But I enjoy doing it, and I want my kids to sort of have an idea of what I think of these books as well, and hopefully some of you guys will appreciate it. So I'll do that as well at some point. But yeah, so there are 7 principles in this book that the devil talks about. I'll read them out to you. One is definiteness of purpose. So you have to have that definiteness of purpose, know exactly what it is you're doing, where you're going. Mastery over self, so controlling your emotions and kind of being disciplined, I suppose. Learning from adversity, so you learn from your mistakes. You know, mistakes are things that are seen as kind of gifts in a way. You make a mistake and you keep going until you succeed. You learn from it and you develop. Controlling environmental influence is another one. Time, to give permanency to positive thought habits rather than negative thought habits, and developing wisdom. Harmony, acting with definiteness of purpose to become the dominating influence in your own physical and spiritual environment. And then caution, thinking through your plan before you act. So yeah, they're all in there. He kind of goes through them. And they make a lot of comparisons as well with the 2008 crash, because it was re-released by his family in 2011. Like I say, I think at the time in 1938 it was considered to be too controversial because he's kind of slagging off the church and the school system and things. So it got released in 2011, and they talk about the 2008 crash and how the parallels are there with the 1926 or the late 1920s financial crisis as well, and how people can use those things as excuses, but actually if you're purposeful enough you can succeed during those times. So it's quite interesting now in 2021 as well with COVID and the financial crash to see the same thing. And it's very easy to say that, isn't it? Let's face it, luck and good fortune has a lot to do with success, particularly in hard times. But there are people who make success in hard times and start businesses in hard times and make changes. And I know lots of people who've been made redundant. I've had difficulties in my business to a certain extent, and then other doors have been opened because of that. So there are opportunities during hard times, but it isn't necessarily as straightforward as just kind of smiling and working hard necessarily. But those things do help, rather than throwing your hands up in the air and giving up, of course. He says that nature basically says, know what you want to do, adapt yourself to my laws, and go for it, and you shall have it. So it kind of sounds very simple, doesn't it? They say it's a sin to do anything that leads to unhappiness. So the devil says it's a sin to do anything that leads to unhappiness. So if you're healthy, etc., then you should be happy all the time. Otherwise, you're just indulging and you're just kind of moaning about things and whinging. So fantastic book. I highly recommend this one. It was really, really good to listen to. Really enjoyable. I think I got it on Audible. Got it with one of my credits, but I think it's free on YouTube. So check it out there. Fantastic book. Please keep liking and subscribing. Speak again soon. Cheers.